Huh? I got it. Check it out. Yeah, you ready? This just in. Breaking news. The Florida market is crashing. Nikki, over to you. Is the housing market as bad as it seems when you're watching all of these FUD videos about inventory increasing and sales and price cuts and all this stuff? Let's talk about it. I don't think it's as bad as it seems. So first things first, Florida housing prices year to date are still up like 1%. Not much, but you're starting to see like the plateau, no doubt about it. But they're not down necessarily. What you still see a lot of, and I think where you're seeing price decreases, is because there's still people that are just absolutely unrealistic, and they're putting their houses up for crazy amounts with the interest rates where they're at, way above, you know, whatever the last person that sold a house was, yada, yada, yada. And so you're starting to see like cuts on a regular basis. So you're absolutely starting to see cuts. And the other thing that probably happened too, depending on last sold, you could be seeing a lot of people too that like bought a house at a really high price and then are trying to sell it, and they want to sell it for more than what they got it for, because after you pay closing costs and all this other stuff,
all your updates,
it's like you have to sell it for really like the golden number is to hold on to a house for 7 years, basically to make your money back. That's kind of what they say, typically, and that's in like a stable environment where you're seeing a standard, you know, whatever 3% year over year increase, blah 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 blah.
Yeah,
blah.
that 2020, and I know you're going to speak to this, but that was just an irrational period of time that skewed everybody's thoughts and numbers.
Yeah. So things are a little bit weird. The one thing that you're going to see everyone harp on that is doing videos where they're basically saying the world's ending and Florida market's crashing is inventory has increased like 50% year to date. You've seen a huge increase in the last year, and so if you're comparing it year to date, it seems insane, but inventory now is basically matching 2019. It's basically caught back up to where it was 2019 prior to COVID.
Because everything's relative. You know, if people compare it to the crazy COVID years of 2020 to 2023, when there was zero inventory, of course it feels like there's so much more inventory, but it wasn't, that was not rational, those years.
The other thing that has really changed or is kind of fudging the numbers in Florida a little bit too, is condos are going up a lot faster, like 78% inventory is up in condos. And a lot of that has to do with like previously the hurricane and insurance and a lot of this stuff that has been changing.
All those rules and stuff that have changed for condo, especially the beachfront condos, now they all have to get engineering and all sorts of assessments. People are throwing their condos on the market.
So what typically happens when interest rates start to drop is you have more, and this is what happened in 2019, just at like or 2020 during COVID, is like this insane flood. But you have more, not necessarily more inventory, but you have more interest on the buyer side. So coming this September, talking about dropping interest rates, you may start to see a little bit more buyers come in. Now the one caveat to that is if they're lowering interest rates because the jobs numbers are horrific and we're basically like sliding into a recession, then you could obviously see people pumping the brakes and waiting if they really feel like they're going to be better buying opportunities in a year or two if they wait. So that's not to say that when they start dropping interest rates, you're going to see a flood of buyers, but I think there probably are a fair amount of people that are obviously kind of waiting for that. The other thing, well, if you're a cash buyer, you're obviously, and we have a lot of cash buyers in the 55 plus.
The 55 plus demographic is still a little bit, it's more about quality and timing than interest rates.
I agree.
So
it's
they
like,
may not wait.
They literally always, you can never time the market.
Can I
You have
tell
to
you
buy a
what
house and hold on to it.
affects
What?
our 55 plus market buyers? When and if they can sell their house where they're at. And right now, it is still a solid market in a lot of places where our homeowners or our buyers are selling their houses. So they're having no problem selling, and then coming down here and buying a home is easy.
If you want to get connected with one of the agents on our team that specializes in 55 plus communities, visit explore55plus.com. Plug's done. Bye. So if jobless comes out and they really have to start rapid fire lowering interest rates because, you know, the economy is about to crash, then obviously it's not necessarily going to bring in more buyers. If you do believe in the Fed, I don't know why that was funny, and you think and you think they're going to land this thing nice and soft, then what might happen in that case would be that we're just like in a new environment where we saw inflation run and then stabilize kind of at the top, and we had this giant gap up. And then when interest rates start to come down, you'll see a little bit more people interested in buying. And I actually think at the beginning you might psychologically see more sellers, because I think there's a lot of people that were like, I can't sell my house because where am I supposed to go? Interest rates are high. So I think you might start to see some people selling. Now again, a lot of this applies to like general real estate, but and not necessarily as much in the 55 plus, but I think I think you might see a little bit more inventory come on, things soften. And honestly, it needs to come back a little bit. Like prices are still very high, especially for where interest rates are compared to where they were. Like houses are still selling at the prices that they got to because of the interest rates being low. And they're still kind of selling up there, especially in pockets. So, and I'm sure if you've been paying attention, like in Florida, it's very pocketed. There's certain areas that are seeing more pain than others. Central Florida is doing relatively well. It seems like.
So from just a statistic with boots on the ground, we are still selling homes, and it's the slowest time of year for us because it's September. It's the hottest time of year, right?
Yeah, it's out of season.
It's out of season, and we're still selling, and the prices are stable. There is more inventory, but it's a healthy inventory. Now,
Finally.
for our buyers, there's choices, and you're not like panicking over whether you can buy that beautiful house you love, because
That was madness.
you got some choice.
So at the peak of the pandemic, houses were selling on average 34 days, which, like, again, on average, you were seeing stuff go like the minute it went live.
Yes.
And it averages
Full
out.
offers, all that fun
So
stuff.
now we're at 57 days on average on market, which is a pretty big increase from 34. But again, going back and comparing to 2019, the average was like 74 days on market.
Yeah.
So you're still substantially faster. Stuff is still selling substantially faster than it was prior to the pandemic. You're seeing the trend line go back towards that, which again is great.
All right, so I think we need to just make a comment. It's an election year. It just slows down a little bit with that. So honestly,
Political uncertainty.
it's, to me, surprisingly good year for sales in the 55 plus communities in Florida.
The one thing that could happen is we could go into like a proper recession. Our jobs reports typically are like that golden standard, like let's keep watching that because that's going to give a lot of insight into where we're at. And I don't know if you guys are in the stock market, but recently a jobs report came out that was way higher, or the jobs report, unemployment was way higher than people expected it. And you had this giant retail sell-off of stocks, and then institutional investors bought it right back up. Listen, don't get me started on that. But there was something that came out, and I can't even really remember off the top of my head, but basically they were saying the jobs numbers were skewed because of, like, when they did it, there was a lot of people at home because of weather or something like that. Which also, I also feel like stuff gets fudged around with before elections. So who knows what's actually happening?
That's true. Right now, it's a little bit of a cluster.
A little bit of uncertainty out there, which totally understand. But I will say, I think to sort of like put a cap on this entire thing, if you are going to sell, if you're a buyer, you're interested in buying, you now have opportunities to negotiate and start to get a better deal, especially if you're cash, because people are sitting around, if they're not cash, they're waiting for interest rates to drop. So right now is a great time to potentially get a deal, especially if you don't think that the whole thing is going to collapse. No, just kidding. So
It's uncertain. I do like that.
If
but
you think things are going to kind of warm back up a little bit, they're going to cool off and warm back up, and they're not necessarily going to crash. Like now is a good time as a buyer to get some some opportunity. There's opportunities out there. So especially if you're cash. Now, if you're a seller, I think it's super important at this point to have a grounded realtor that really understands where your numbers are going to be, priced accordingly, and then doing those things now, like making sure the landscaping and the curb appeal is appropriate, and making sure some of the stuff inside is finished and things like that. When a house is nice and it's priced accordingly, it flies off the market. 3 years ago, you could have sold your own house. You could have put a fart under a roof and literally listed it, and anyone would have bought it.
He can stop.
I'm
And you
trying
know
to keep that in. No, it's fine.
that.
Well, it was true, but now you're in an environment where like you have to be a little bit educated as a seller. You have to be, and then as a buyer, you have opportunities. So if you're with someone that knows what they're doing, there's great opportunities.
Yep, takes the beware out of buyer beware if you got a good agent that can help you through this. All of this boils down to, which it always has, get a good agent, because we know all of that and we can help you think through what you need to list your house at to be attractive to this pool of buyers that you're going to get right off the bat. I honestly think what's going to happen is the first quarter of next year is going to show a lot. The election will be over, we'll be all settled back in. It'll be season here in Florida, and we always speak to Florida. And I think it's going to show, but I think we're doing okay now. I think we're going to have a great.
It's not bad, and everyone's looking at the trend line and going, "Holy crap! If this continues, it'll be bad." But it'll be interesting to see where it goes. We don't have a crystal ball. Things are starting just get back to normal. That's where things are
Even
going.
insurance crazies have started to even out again. I've heard people saying that they are not so unhappy with their insurance.
When
costs.
we've done insurance videos, you guys should watch the insurance video we did, where it was very insightful to us. A lot of the stuff around insurance was legislation that needed to be changed or removed that was stopping companies from really operating in Florida. Anyways, they know that's a problem. It's not sustainable for insurance to continue to do what it's doing. So that's being changed. I don't know. Let's end there. Let's watch that insurance video if you're interested in that. That's a very interesting video. Ruined Argentina.
Michael, we'll never get through this video. You keep going off of brands.
Argentina used to be one of the highest rated places to live, and it got destroyed.